So laptops with two screens are now a thing, and this is the ZenBook Pro Duo. This is the first laptop that I've used that had a full width screen. I mean, there's the touch bar from Apple, but this is like an actual usable screen. And when they first announced this thing, I think the thought that ran through a lot of people's mind was, is this a gimmick or is this actually going to bring functionality? And this is what this video is about. Like, how usable is this screen? Now, just to get this right out of the way, Asus includes a bunch of kind of built-in applications and a built-in UI for this secondary screen. It's cool that they made custom apps for this display, but they didn't feel useful to me. I found that the real value of this bottom screen was just using it as an extended screen, or just like a second screen for your computing experience. The thing I wanted to use this device for was for video editing. I use Adobe Premiere, and the idea was to run the application so that it would just basically stretch across both screens, and it would run my timeline on the bottom screen. Because when I edit videos, I usually stare more at the image instead of the actual timeline, and I found it to be useful, but there are a few things you should be aware of. First, you have to adjust your workspace so that it fits into these two windows, but you have to understand that this bottom panel does not have a great viewing angle from your regular sitting position. You do have to look basically flat down at it. So you don't want to have your really important stuff down there. You want your critical work up top and kind of like your supplementary work at the bottom. The other thing is that in Adobe Premiere, if you want to view something in full screen, you hit the tilde key and it'll fill up the whole screen. The problem is the program now thinks the top and the bottom panel are the full screen, so the image is now stretched across both screens. It's something that I could personally work around, but I think for some content creation that might be a bigger issue. But the whole idea of having two separate screens that have extra real estate for your workflow is really nice. And this works for any kind of content creation, whether it be Photoshop, Illustrator, or any kind of creation of work where you want to have a lot of stuff on your screen. This is nice. Now, the second thing I thought that this double screen setup would be useful for is for just multitasking. So you can have YouTube running and like a web browser and Reddit, or just have multiple windows running so you can monitor multiple things at the same time. Now, as for how useful that is, I really think that depends on what you're using those screens for. If you're just browsing the web, I don't think this is worth the extra money over a normal laptop. But if you're using it in terms of like having reference material on one screen and then typing on the other screen, like doing some kind of publication, then yeah, I could see this being useful. But in terms of just multi-paneled workflows, it's not bad. The last scenario I thought this could work for is for gaming. Now, this isn't a dedicated gaming laptop. It's a pretty powerful system. It's running an 8-core Intel CPU and an RTX 2060, so it's got some powerful components, but the idea was to run a game on the main screen and then have info on the bottom screen. Like, you can have build guides or Discord or Twitch if you're a streamer. You could just run whatever you want on that second screen. But the issue I found with this particular scenario is that the game that you're playing in, because these are 4K screens, you can't easily switch between them unless your game is running in 4K, and this system isn't great for 4K gaming. So the scenario of gaming on this device and using that secondary screen for something is cool. It sounds great on paper, but I just found that it was difficult to actually make it a worthwhile experience. I think most people are better off buying a regular gaming laptop and then plugging up a secondary screen to their device. So with all three scenarios, I found video editing to take advantage of this bottom screen the most readily, but it's still not a perfect situation. The biggest issue is the angle of the screen. It's not like when you're viewing from top, it's weird to kind of glance down and then back up to whatever you're looking at. So you really need to run just secondary info on that bottom screen. I do kind of wish that this screen would pop up a little bit. Like, there's already a bit of lift from the ergo lift mechanism, but I wish it would just tilt up a few degrees more so you could see it more easily, but that's what we have. Now, speaking of ergo lift, when you open and close this laptop, there is a mechanism to raise the back of the laptop to help with airflow. So this screen, just by nature of its position, makes it more difficult to cool this device than a regular gaming laptop, because this screen is sitting on top of the hottest components. The CPU and GPU are right underneath here. And to compensate for that, they have to do this ergo lift system, and they're pulling air from the sides and underneath the laptop to cool this. They've done an adequate job. When I'm running renders, there's no thermal throttling, but when I'm playing games, after like 40 minutes, it does throttle a little bit. Granted, this is not a gaming laptop, and this is just an engineering sample, but I actually think they could have run these fans a little bit harder. It's a pretty quiet system, even on load. Okay, just a quick review for the rest of the device. It's a 15-inch laptop, but it's not super thin. For a performance laptop, it's on the thicker side, but it's the secondary screen and the way they have to cool this thing because of that screen that gives it that extra thickness. The screens are really nice. The top is an OLED panel, the bottom is an IPS panel. If you're worried about OLED burn-in like we've seen on phones, I don't think it's as big of an issue on laptop screens. Maybe they're not running them as bright, but the few burn-in tests that I've run on these devices, I'm not seeing any issues. So I feel relatively confident purchasing OLED screens right now. The keyboard is shifted down. Obviously they've done this to fit that secondary screen. The typing experience is okay. They include a wrist rest, but even typing without that wrist rest is perfectly fine. It's just that the keystrokes are a little bit shallow. They're 1.4 millimeter travel. The trackpad's on the right, and this is something you have to get used to, but I think most people using this device are gonna be running an external mouse. So battery life on this system, I was hitting 4 hours, a little bit less than that. It's a 71 watt-hour battery. It's not a huge battery, and I'll be honest, I thought the battery life would be shorter, but 4 hours is not bad. On the inside, you also have access to the Wi-Fi card. It's running the new Intel Wi-Fi 6 chip, and you also have access to the NVMe, but the RAM is soldered on. So you have to figure out at the time of purchase how much RAM you want because you cannot upgrade that on this system. The port selection is also fair. There's 2 USB-A's, 1 Thunderbolt 3, and that's basically it. There's also an HDMI port, but in terms of USB connectivity, it's just those 3. It's usable, but for a laptop that's geared towards creatives, I would have liked to have seen an extra port or maybe 2. The speakers sound nice though. It's a ZenBook. They often have good speakers. Now, if you're looking at this device and you're wondering, should I actually get this? Like, is this something that's gonna fit my workflow? The one kind of suggestion that I would have is if you're someone that could benefit from extra screen real estate on your laptop, then consider this, but keep in mind that because the screen is on a weird viewing angle, you need to be someone whose workflow doesn't require both of your screens to have perfect viewing angles. This bottom screen is useful, but it's best when you put secondary information in it or some kind of like reference material or stuff that is important, but not as important as the stuff that's on your main display. So reviewing a product like this is difficult because when you put your mindset into the average user that might actually consider this, usually there's no like learning curve when it comes to using a product. But for something like this, you actually have to sit down and like, if I bought this thing, if I spent the money to buy this device, I would spend the time to customize my workflow and customize my workspace to make it fit this dual screened device. But if you don't do that, it's difficult to really maximize the usability of this thing. Like, you do need to learn its nuances and figure out how it'll fit into your workflow to make this device really worth the money. But if you can make it fit, I think for those people, it's a cool device. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. See you guys next time.